The political world is reeling as Mark Carney executes a staggering 180-degree betrayal that has left Washington seething. Not long ago, Carney was seen desperately playing the sycophant, attempting to buy Donald Trump's favor with back-channel compliments and promises of a new chapter in US-Canada relations. It was a calculated display of submission designed to paint Carney as the only man capable of negotiating with the new US administration. But the mask has slipped, and the fallout is nuclear. In a move that can only be described as diplomatic suicide, Carney was caught on camera mocking the Trump administration before the global press. In a cringe-worthy display of arrogance, Carney began parading like a cheap impersonator, mimicking Trump's signature hand gestures and that iconic, skeptical, "I don't believe it" tone. He thought he was showing strength. Instead, he exposed a devastating lack of character. The reaction from the Trump inner circle was swift and lethal. JD Vance, the architect of the America First resurgence, did not mince words. He characterized Carney's behavior as pure self-destruction. For the MAGA movement, this isn't just a joke. It's a declaration of hostility. The United States does not deal with leaders who turn their commander-in-chief into a laughingstock while simultaneously begging for favorable trade deals and military protection. As Carney tries to pivot back to being a globalist moral apostle, claiming Canada needs no more dictated deals from the US, the bridge hasn't just been burned, it's been vaporized. The era of fake smiles is over. Washington has seen the real Carney, and they are finished with the charade. JD Vance looked directly at the row of Canadian officials, men and women, who had spent years lecturing the world on climate virtue and moral superiority. And he didn't offer a handshake. He offered a brutal clinical autopsy of a dying economy. The silence in the room was deafening as he delivered the line that would echo across every news ticker from New York to Toronto. Canada is currently running the single most idiotic energy policy on the entire planet. The phrase wasn't just an insult, it was a verdict. Vance proceeded to dismantle the ideological scaffolding of the Canadian government with the precision of a prosecutor. He pointed out the staggering absurdity of a nation sitting on some of the largest oil reserves in the world, yet deliberately crippling its own energy sector with punishing carbon taxes and regulatory warfare. The great moral hypocrisy. Vance's voice grew sharper as he exposed the dirty secret of Ottawa's green vanity. He called out the blatant hypocrisy of Canadian leadership, the net zero fantasy. He slammed the government for pretending to be climate saviors while secretly relying on American energy to keep Canadian homes warm and factories running, all while demonizing the very oil and gas industry that built their country. The fracking irony. He mocked the Canadian moral apostles who looked down on American energy dominance while simultaneously begging the US to keep the pipelines open and the border soft, so their economy doesn't collapse. The global reality check, while Canada deindustrializes itself in a fit of ideological hysteria, Vance pointed to the rest of the world. America is producing more oil than any nation in history. Saudi Arabia is expanding. Brazil is surging. Even Mexico is outpacing them. Economic self-flagellation. This isn't climate protection, Vance thundered, his voice echoing off the walls. This is national suicide. This is economic self-flagellation. He laid the blame squarely at the feet of the old liberal establishment and their NDP enablers, accusing them of sacrificing the Canadian middle class on the altar of a green utopian delusion. The data Vance presented was a horror show for the Canadian taxpayer. While Carney and Trudeau tried to sell the collapse as a just transition, Vance revealed it for what it truly is, the third worldization of a formerly great resource power. He noted that the high energy costs aren't just a phase, They are a death sentence for Canadian oil, forestry, mining and manufacturing. The American taxpayer ultimatum. The most chilling part of Vance's speech wasn't about oil or carbon, it was about the price of protection. He linked energy security directly to the military alliance. Why, Vance asked, his eyes cold and calculating, should the American taxpayer subsidize the defense of a country that is intentionally destroying its own energy industry? Why should we protect a nation that chooses to commit economic harakiri? The Canadian representatives sat in stunned, paralyzed silence. Some looked at their shoes, others fidgeted with their pens, but in the back of the room, several U.S. senators were nodding. Some even broke into applause. The message was unmistakable. The golden era of Canada lecturing the world while the U.S. carries the burden is officially dead. Vance concluded this segment with a warning that sent shivers through the Liberal leadership. Washington is no longer interested in strategic patience with leaders who value ideology over reality. The green miracle was exposed as a black hole, and the bill has finally come due. With a slow, deliberate motion, JD Vance pulled a thick document from his briefcase and held it high for the global media to see. It was the latest U.S. State Department report on democratic backsliding. For the first time in modern history, Canada was not being hailed as a beacon of freedom. Instead, it was depicted as a nation sliding into soft authoritarianism. The indictment of tyranny. Vance's voice cut through the air as he read the scathing lines: weaponization of financial institutions against protesters, systematic state interference in speech, and the criminalization of legitimate political dissent. He looked directly at Mark Carney and snarled, "In America, we call that tyranny. You froze bank accounts of working-class truckers for protesting. You push online harms bills to silence citizens. Never dare lecture America on morality while you're turning your own country into a thought prison." The ultimatum. Freedom for trade. The most lethal blow came when Vance directly linked economic survival to political liberty. He laid an offer that cannot be refused on the negotiating table. The U.S. is prepared to slash tariffs and ease trade barriers to save the struggling Canadian economy. The sole condition: Ottawa must immediately abolish its censorship legislation, kill the Online Harms Act, and stop the persecution of dissenting voices. The American taxpayer will not spend a single cent protecting a nation that imprisons its citizens for wrongthink, Vance declared. This was a decapitation strike against the power structure of the old parties. Washington was openly demanding the demolition of the tools Carney uses to silence conservatives. The rise of the patriots. The signal from Washington is undeniable. They no longer need sycophants or moral apostles like Carney. While Trump's strategists publicly snubbed the Canadian delegation, they spent hours in closed-door sessions with Pierre Poilievre and conservative leadership. Washington is placing its bets on those they call the real patriots. Panic is spreading through the ranks of the Liberal Party. Carney's screams about interference only highlight the fragility of a collapsing system. The world is witnessing a great transition. An old Canada fading away in its dogmatism, making way for a wave of realism and freedom. As JD Vance stepped down from the podium, he didn't look back. He knew he had just ignited a revolution. 2026 will not just be a year on the calendar, it will be the year the Canadian people reclaim their voice, backed by the big brother across the border.